Welcome to the Leader Impact podcast. We are a community of leaders with a network in over 350 cities from around the world, dedicated to optimizing our personal, professional, and spiritual lives to have impact. This show is where we have a chance to listen and engage with leaders who are living this out. We love talking with leaders, so if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions to make this show even better, please let us know. The best way to stay connected in Canada is through our newsletter at leaderimpact.ca or on social media at LeaderImpact. And if you are listening from outside of Canada, check out our website at leaderimpact.com. I'm your host, Lisa Peters, and our guest today is Paul Henderson. Today you are going to meet not only a Canadian hockey legend, but the man who started Leader Impact in 1984. Paul Henderson, a former Canadian NHLer who played left wing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Detroit Red Wings, and Atlanta Flames, is best known for scoring the winning goal for Team Canada in the 1972 Summit Series against the former USSR. Paul's many accolades include being a member of several Sports Hall of Fame, honored with numerous awards, including the Order of Canada, as well as Paul holds 2 honorary Doctor of Divinity degrees, as well as authored several books, including his own autobiography. And while Paul has achieved 50 years of name recognition for his hard work, from a single moment in time, his life purpose was realized after his career on the ice. Despite the fame, he felt an emptiness, something was missing. In this podcast, we're going to draw on Paul's experience to help leaders in the business world navigate through leadership in their personal, professional, and spiritual lives. Please welcome Paul Henderson to the Leader Impact podcast. Hello, Paul. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
You know, I'm gonna kind of totally fan out here for a minute because I do have a son that plays hockey. So I was 3 years old in 1972. I didn't quite see the game, but I did my research and I wrote down, it amazes me that I watched you score the game-winning goal. So I watched that and thought, oh, that was it. But you were so big in that series. I mean, I watched you score the goal that tied the game 3. You hit your head to the boards in game 5, most likely a concussion. You came back in game 5. I watched you score the game-winning goals in games 6 and 7, and of course, 8. Did I get that right? Sounds about right?
Sounds pretty good.
With all those games, that is truly a moment frozen in time and is the goal of the century. It has been called the goal that united Canada. And I really am going to stop talking here, but I'm honored to have you here because this podcast launched on 50 years to the date you scored that goal. That's I'm fanning out. So my first question, because I know we have a lot of sports fans listening to this, is I want to talk to you about that last 50 seconds of Game 8 in the 1972 Summit Series. I want to hear it from you, the last 50 seconds.
Well, I just need to, the game was tied. And if the game, there was going to be no overtime, and the Russians came down and told us in the third period that if the game ended up in a tie, they were going to claim victory because they had scored one more goal than we had at this point. And I remember telling my wife after we lost the first game that if we don't win the last 3 games, we're going to be known as the biggest losers in the history of Canadian hockey. There was a little bit of pressure on us. So anyway, the game goes on, and Bobby Clark, Ronnie Ellis, and we were the only line that actually played all 8 games and stayed together. We came off the ice with about a minute and a half left in the third period, and Harry Sinden sent out Esposito, Cornway, and Peter Mahovlich. And then for some reason, he came down and said to us, if they come off, you guys are up. And so he told us, we're going back out if there's any time. Well, we're sitting there, and about 1 minute left in the game, Lisa, I did something I never did before, and I never did it again. But something with him, we got to win this game. And I stood up and I started yelling at the left winger, Peter Mahovlich. And Frank, his brother, was sitting beside me. He said, what are you doing? And I just ignored him and kept yelling. Peter comes off, and I jump over the boards, and I yelled at Yvonne Cornway. He had the puck on the far side, but he fired it across, and it was too far in front of me. I fell into the boards, and I remember saying, I still have time. I went through the whole team of Game 7. But just as I get in front of the net, Phil Esposito whacked it at Tretiak, and he should never have let a rebound out, but it came right to me, and I actually had panicked. Oh my God! And I took it and I tried to shoot it right along the ice, and he threw out his pad and he got it, but it came back to me, and I put it in the net and jumped into Cornway's arms, and I've been celebrating for 50 years.
50 years. So, you know, it's funny that you said, because that line was on, and until that line was going to come off, you would jump on. But you called how do I say that?
Peter Mahovlich.
You called him off. Now, my son's a hockey player, but I'm thinking he was the assistant captain. You called the assistant captain off the ice. That's well, like code of hockey, isn't it?
Well, nobody's ever done. I never did. I never heard anybody else did it. But that's, you know, when you look back over it, like, what were you thinking? And then after I thought, man, when I took him off, imagine if they'd have gone down and scored a goal, we'd have lost that series. Yeah. See, I'd be living in Siberia today, not Canada. There's a risk reward, though.
Yeah, there wouldn't be the goal of the century, and it, you know, yeah. Can you explain or even understand the impact you still have 50 years from 50 years ago? Like, it's still impact today. Like, we're still talking about it, Paul.
Yeah, and it's never abated in any way since. But I think, you know, Canada is a hockey country. Yeah. But the difference about this, like when the Stanley Cup wins the Stanley Cup, it's usually that the city, and you know, there's obviously fans across the country. But you see, in '72, it was the whole country. We were Team Canada. Yeah. And the country shut down. They really did. And so there's hardly ever a day, Lisa, if I met a person for the first time, they will automatically tell me where they were, what they were doing, and who they were with, and what they felt. And it was really neat yesterday. There was a launch of a new book, and they asked me to come, and there was 10 Canadians that were in Russia with us at the games, and I got my picture taken with them yesterday, and I told them without them we would have never won this series. They just got behind us like crazy. So I've been doing this for 50 years to understand it. You know, the older I get, I really think God was involved, because I wasn't that good, really. Yeah. I mean, just, you know, 7 goals and score the winning goal in the last 3. Yeah. The games, I mean, it just, you couldn't, no one would ever write a plot like that and get anybody to believe it. But this one actually happened.
Yeah. So I've heard you in other interviews, you call this the garbage goal. And I mean, it's right in front of the net, you're digging, and I get it. Well, I don't get it, because a goal is a goal. But I have here, garbage goals are invariably benefactors of line mates who are good playmakers. And I like that. And I believe that might have been Phil Esposito who said that. But that garbage goal, I'm not a hockey player. I'm a hockey mom. but you got to work hard.
Yeah, but, you know, I scored 7 goals. 6 were really nice goals.
Okay.
Like Foster Hewitt, a hockey player who really loves to live. Henderson makes a wild stab forward and falls. You know, I'd say, and Henderson goes down. Oh, he makes an incredible move. It's in the top corner. Henderson scored. I would have much, much preferred that.
Nope. We just wanted a goal. We wanted to win. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I'll take it. I'm not going to give it back.
Yeah. So we're going to step back a few years now, and I want to ask you about the people you surround yourself with, because Paul Henderson is not made on his own. I'm sure there are a lot of people that you've surrounded yourself with that have allowed you to reach success. So was there a teacher, a coach, multiple people who stepped up to encourage you or had an impact on your life towards being a professional hockey player?
Well, I got to mention my father first. I was playing for the Hamilton Red Wings, and in my second year, in 1962, we won the Memorial Cup. And it was a great thrill. But I had met my future wife. We were going together, and I grew up poor, and I hated being poor. And so I talked with her, and I said, you know, Eleanor, I think I need to get an education. I'm going to have to put myself through university, and And we talked about that. We knew we were going to get married. And so I phoned the Detroit Red Wings and told them I was not going to come back for my last year. But I knew that I was going to have to tell my father. And my father weighed 280, and he was an intimidating guy. And he had a pretty good temper, too. And I was actually a little worried about telling him this. And so I went home, and Eleanor and I discussed it. She said she would get a job, and we would, do it. And so I told my dad what I was thinking of doing, and he surprised me. He looked at me and he said, Paul, he said, I'm not telling you you're making a bad decision, but son, you've been telling me all your life that you're going to be an NHL hockey player. And he says, when you see the Toronto Maple Leafs skate out there on a Saturday night, you're going to say to yourself, I wonder if I could have made it. And son, I think it will drive you crazy. Yeah. And so I went and I told Eleanor what my dad had said. And she said the same thing. Paul, you told me since we started going out that I was going to marry an NHL hockey player. And I think your dad is right. And Dad said, well, why don't you go back, try your best, and give it 2 years. If you can't make the NHL in 2 years, you still have time to go to, get an education and get by. And so that's what I did. I went back and I really got serious my last year, and I led the league in goals and made the Detroit Red Wings the next year. But those two people had the biggest impact on my life. In fact, the woman I married, I can tell you, Lisa, if I had a choice of all the women in the world, I could never have made a better choice. And she's probably taught me as much as anybody in the world. And we are so opposite. She would sooner lose a game, a card game or anything, than let the other people feel good. You play tiddlywinks with me, I want to win, and I'm going to play to win. And so she's taken a lot of, rough quarters off my life, but she's the heart and soul of the Henderson clan, and I am so thankful. I've only one fear in life, and the one fear is that that she would die before me, because she will make it a lot better without me than I will without her. Aww. So my dad and my wife were the two biggest influences in my life.
Wow. Everyone needs those. And, not everyone has a family that is their number one support or partners. So, just listening to you, I hope other people find those people, their people, to support them and go, you know what, you need to give it another try. You need to go back and just try hard. I hope everybody has that like you did, because they're so important to surround yourself with the right people. So going now, so we've heard, who was there for you. I want to ask you about when you scored that big goal. What happened to you personally after scoring the big goal and going back to hockey? Because I think, was it tough to think, am I ever going to match that moment? And I take this to everything. We do something big in life and we're like, how am I going to match that? Or, I have an event management company and I plan a big event and I'm like, I got to make it bigger next year. So to you, I ask, did you ever think, how am I going to match the game-winning goal?
No, I don't think I thought that way, but it was just, there was too much too quick. Yeah. Like overnight, I became sort of this hero in Canada. And what really affected us, we were a very private family, mainly because my wife protected us that way, but we couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't do anything, go to a restaurant. And even though we'd be eating, people would throw in, excited. They come over and they want a picture, even while we're eating, and it used to drive Eleanor crazy. But then even on the ice, when the game was tied or something like that, you could just feel I'd go out on the ice and people would start cheering. And then I would try to do things that I shouldn't have tried to do. I was trying to do, going through the whole team was nothing the only time I ever did it was in the 7th game. And so it was a very difficult time. Yeah. And the worst of all, though, was that when I was a kid growing up, I didn't want to be poor. I didn't want to be ultra rich or anything like that. I wanted to have enough money where you didn't have to bother about it. I wanted to have a great marriage and family, which I had, and I wanted to have a career in hockey. And I was, Ronnie Ellis, Norm Yellman, and I were aligned, and I was playing, and the WHA come along, and even the future looked better in terms of financial security and that. But I knew I wasn't happy, and I wasn't content. And I would say to Eleanor, "Gosh, honey, there got to be something missing."
Yeah.
And she would say, "Paul, we got a great marriage, with a great family. Just relax and enjoy it the way I am." And I said, "Sweetheart, I just have a sense that there's something missing." And so it was a very difficult time, a really difficult time. And I was searching for answers, and I didn't have many. And I was, and I probably got a little bit too big for my shoes, a little arrogance, maybe a whole lot of arrogance seeped in. And I didn't like the person that I was becoming. I really, really didn't.
I think a lot of people find themselves in that, but they don't know what to do, Paul. We don't know the next steps. We don't know who to reach out to. And this is a Leader Impact podcast. We're here. We're for those people who are seeking, but you started Leader Impact, so it wasn't around. So what did you do? That you're empty, but what do you do?
Well, actually, a guy knocked on my door, Mel Stevens from Teen Ranch. This was in January of '73. And he said, I would like you to work in my hockey school. And I said, yeah, I do that. And what do you pay? And he said, well, we don't have any money to pay that. We're a Christian school. And I'd ask you to donate your time. Do you not know who you're talking to? And I used to make good money doing that. And we get into a conversation, and then he says, Paul, I watch you on television all the time, he says, and you always look like you got an edge to yourself. You look like you're not a very contented, happy person. And they tell me you got a great marriage and obviously got a great career and everything like that. But he said, you don't look like you're a very happy person in a lot of ways. And no one had ever said that to me. And am I wearing a sign or something like that? And then he said to me, Lisa, Paul, you can learn to live lightly and freely. And he says, have you ever looked at the spiritual side of life? And I said, I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about religion. It just gets into, my wife goes to church and probably believes, but I'm not into that. But when he said to me, and he said, talk to a guy, he just seemed to be a little different. And he said, Paul, and I said, well, I've tried to read the Bible, but it just doesn't, I don't connect with it. I'm a lot better on the golf course. And if I go to church with my wife, I'm really on the golf course anyway. So he said, well, Paul, I'll get you a modern translation and I'll meet with you. And Lisa, he met with me for the next 2 years, almost trying to convince me that Jesus was who he said he was. And when you start out as a cynic, it's very difficult. And I didn't even think of it being a Christian could play in the NHL, but on March 12, 1975, I gave my life to the Lord that day. And I said, Lord, there's a lot of things I don't understand about you, but I really believe that you love me. And I believe that you died for me. And boy, I know I need forgiveness. And I ask you to forgive me and wipe the slate clean and help me become the person you want me to be. And I said in the same thing, don't you ever expect me to tell anybody about this, because I'm going to be a Secret Service Christian. And Lisa, when we would go on the road, the only guy that knew that I was looking at this was my best buddy, Ronnie Ellis. But back then, everybody read Playboy, and I'd go on the plane, and I'd take the Playboy, and I'd put my Bible inside the Playboy, and I'd lean against the window. And everybody thought I was reading Playboy, which everybody did, and I was reading my Bible. And it's incredible when I think back, but I think, and you know what? I'd been a Christian for about a month, and I knew the day that penthouse was going to come, and I looked for it. I went down to the mailbox. I knew it was going to be there. I took it out, and Lisa, I shouldn't open this thing. And I took it and I threw it in the garbage can, never took it out, went upstairs and I had a whole bunch of copies, threw them in the garbage can, and I knew that God was real. I just knew, don't you ever do that again. And I can honestly say, I've never looked at one since and never will. And there was little things that would happen. Oh my gracious, where did that come from? And obviously knew it was the Lord.
So how long did it take for you to be a, hidden Christian, hiding, to when you kindly said, I'm a follower? Like, what was that time?
It took me 3 days to tell Eleanor, because Eleanor was a very private person. You go to church, but you don't get radical about this kind of stuff. And she knows I either do something or I don't do it. And usually try to do it very well. And she was petrified that I'd become one of these evangelical guys or something like that. And so I sat her down and I said, honey, we've been looking at this. And 3 days ago, I gave my life to the Lord. I became a Christian. And she said, oh, wonderful, and got up and walked out. It took me, and that set me back a bit. And then it took me another few days that I sat down with Mel and I said, Mel, I've asked the Lord into my life. And, but it was really funny. He said to me, he said, Paul, don't get on Eleanor's case. Just love her the way you have and don't try to push her anything like that. And so I'm a little aggressive, Lisa, and I got a Bible and I put it on her pillow. Don't ever do that, okay? But Lisa, after about 2 months, Eleanor came and she said, something's happened. We used to go to bed, you tossed and turned, I always went to sleep before you did, and you were so restless, you'd sit down and read, you had to do something else, and there's something's happened within you. And that opened her eyes, and she started reading a Bible, and Mel started helping her a bit, and a couple of months later, she actually gave her life to the Lord too, and we've just gone from there.
That's a good story. And I think that's how it happens for a lot of people is sometimes, the partner will go in and then they'll just lightly lay the Bible on the pillow.
Don't do that.
That's the aggressive style. So do you reflect back on your life and feel that it was well planned and, that scoring that goal was just a springboard to sort of the next phase of your life? Because that goal opened up a whole new life for you. I mean, things changed for you. Do you see that?
Well, yeah. Well, what happened, I jumped to the WHA, and we went to Birmingham, Alabama in '76, and I was a new Christian. And we went to this church, and we put our 3 girls in a Christian school. And this businessman, I got to know right off the bat, and he said he was starting a men's group, and with some guys that were new Christians, and asked me if I'd like to join it. And I said, yeah, I think I would. I would really like to grow. And the guy was just a very, very intelligent man, very successful businessman. And he said, we're going to meet from 6:30 to 8 o'clock on Mondays. And I said, gosh, that's our dinner hour, and, it's just not convenient. He says, no, it's in the morning. Are you kidding me? 6:30 in the morning? I'm a hockey player. I don't get out of bed till 9 o'clock. And honest to goodness, but this guy intrigued me, and I went, and I was about a 20-minute, we built a home out in the country, and it was about a 20 minutes drive down to where he was, and I get in my car, and I am never doing this again. This is ridiculous. It's dark outside in the wintertime. And the next 3 years, I met with this guy, and he became my mentor, and he changed my life. He became one of the best friends I ever had, and he modeled what it was to be a godly man, as a husband, as a father, as a businessman, and everything like that. And I was in there for 3 years, and him and my pastor came to me and said, we got some new guys that are joining the church, and we'd like you to disciple them. I can't do that. I don't even a Christian, And sometimes you need somebody that's got some more confidence in yourself than you have. And they said, Paul, trust God and do it. And gosh, within the first month, I loved it. And the guys were coming. Had them memorizing scripture, and it was just terrific. And then at the end of my hockey career, I really felt that when I retired, I went to seminary for a couple of years. And then I really felt that God was saying to me that you go back to Canada and you reach out to the Paul Hendersons of the world. The people, they're not going to go to church. They're successful. and you know their fears and everything like that. And so I came back here and with 3 men, downtown Toronto, started my first little group. And we met for about 4 weeks. And I said to these guys, do you have any friends that are out to lunch spiritual? I don't want guys that are going to church or that, but if any guys that, and the one fellow says, I got a neighbor that he was a very devout Christian, this guy. But anyway, he said, my neighbor, I just can't get him to. And I said, well, why don't we just have a breakfast, invite some of your friends, and I'll share my testimony, a short testimony, and you tell them what you're getting out of this group. And so we did. We did that, and we ended up with 12 people, and that's where it started. And then the next year, I started one over in Hamilton, and my goal was to start. If I could get 25 groups going, I would have a movement. And I knew that was all about, you got to develop leaders. Yeah. And John Bradford instilled in me, you got to have guys, you got to have people that are deep. And so I started looking at my guys that I thought could be leaders, and they were the guys that I spent time with. And that's where it started. And now it's just, it's taken off like crazy. Now, I ran a pretty good mom and pop shop until I got my cancer. And I think we're up to about 80 groups, I think, at that time. But I knew that they told me I might have 5 years to live. And so I knew I had to get some people in there to run this thing. And I was hopefully going to stay around. And we got some really sharp guys, entrepreneurs, and it would never have taken off the way it has if I hadn't stepped out of the way. And when I took over, I said to them, listen, I know how to lead, but I'm not sure I know how to follow. And so I'm not going to second guess you. I'm never going to offer you advice unless you ask me for it. But I will be here. I'll help you out financially, and I'll speak and do all those kind of things. And it's been a terrific transition. They know I've got their back.
Yeah.
And I don't have to go to any more blasted meetings or strategy things. That's
at 6:30 in the morning.
Well, I still do that. I still have my men's group. I'll never ever give those up. In fact, we just started a new season this Tuesday of this week, and the highlight of my week is Tuesday mornings.
So do you do any book studies or do you study anything particular, or just get together?
Oh, no, well, we use the Bible. We usually do a book, and then we go back to the Bible.
Okay.
And so we'll do a lot of times, whatever, and and we'll ask the guys, what is there a book that you would like to read or anything? But that's what I usually do. Do a book. A book I highly recommend. We just got into it. I read this summer is "Live No Lies" by Mark Comer. He's a pastor out in Portland. Live, L-I-V-E, no lies. And he talks about we have three the world, the flesh, and the devil. These are the enemies that we have that try to get us off track and everything like that. Very challenging book. And you look up here. Well, I used to read, when I first started the ministry, I used to read at least 30 books a year. Wow. Good Christian books, a lot on leadership and that. And John Bradford, the guy that said, Paul, never quit learning. Mm-hmm. You put your foot in the gas. And actually, Lisa, when we built a home down there and a lot of bookshelves, I bought 300 books. My pastor, we had a library in the church. And that got my pastor, I got commentaries. I bought 300 books because I said, I got the money now, and I had all these spaces to put on. I bought 300 books in one day. And, I eventually read almost every one of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, our LeaderImpact is just last week. We started with Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud.
Oh, great author.
Yes, and there's so many good leadership books that we study, and I'm sure you have a list of them, and other guests have listed them, and they're really good, and just how they relate to your spiritual side. So now that we're talking about LeaderImpact, and if people didn't hear me in the beginning, I mean, you started one group. When you left, when you sort of transitioned, there was 80. We're in 350 cities now, around the world.
921.
What was that?
We're in 921 cities, 77 countries.
Wow. Yeah. It is.
Scary.
It's amazing what you started. So it's an honor to be here. I wanted to ask you, what, just for people listening, and they're thinking of themselves and why they would do this, but what would you consider the benefits of joining a LeaderImpact group?
Well, one of the benefits is you got a bunch of peers that you can come and there's no such thing as a dumb question. Yeah. And you can examine this, your life. And you don't have to make mistakes. Other people have probably in the group have made them, and there's a lot of great advice. I had one group and I had 7 CEOs in there. Do you think there wasn't a little bit of, and so it gets, and iron sharpens iron too. But it's a very safe place, and you can, we don't push, Jesus on you. You figure it out on your own, and you got a place to ask the questions. And obviously, we give you good advice and good books to read. I mean, John Bradford, C.S. Lewis, I read so much of his, and all kinds of different things. And so everybody is different. And that's what makes a work really, a group work well. Because people bring a different perspective, a different thing. And so and the friendships. My closest friends today are guys that have come to know the Lord through the ministry, usually. Yeah. And so it's just a very great place to meet some guys that are very, very intelligent and been down the road, can give you good advice, or somebody comes and says, I think my kid may be on drugs. Well, here's what you don't do. You understand what I mean? And so, but obviously we try to point them to Jesus. Yeah. He is the one, he calls them, he says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. And I have found that, I have never once, Lisa, regretted doing it God's way. And every time that I have violated God's principles, I've regretted 100% of the time. But God doesn't expect us to be perfect. He knows we're weak, but he says, I am there to forgive you. Just like I'm a parent. I had 3 daughters, and they were just great kids, but they were not perfect. Now I've got grandchildren, and they're perfect. It's unbelievable. All I got to do is love them and spoil them. Yeah. And that's the way God looks at me. I'm his child. I'm not perfect, but he loves me. He's willing to die for me. And I don't beat myself up. When I do dumb things, I just take it back to the Lord. That, Lord, it's me, and I know that he's going to forgive me. And you don't have to beat yourself up. He said, I came that you would have life and have it abundantly. And Lisa, I refuse to have a bad day, even with cancer. And when you're not afraid of dying, I know I've already started my eternal life. It's just a matter of, I leave this life and go to the heaven. And I pray every day, oh, Lord, please take me home before my wife. That's my only fear. Oh.
I only have a few more questions left, but I want to ask you one just about influence in your leadership. So not everybody is going to score the goal of the century, and not everybody is going to make the $1 billion deal. And so I want to talk to those people, or I want you to talk to them, because they think they have to do that to have it all together. The big goal that you don't. So what advice would you give to people listening that they can understand that you can be an influence at any level of leadership?
Well, I think that, where God made us all different. And find out what your giftedness is. Yeah. I like to be up front. I like to speak. I like to lead. My wife, Eleanor, doesn't. She would sooner be in the kitchen cooking than being out front. That's just who she is. But I'll tell you what, she is every bit as much influence with me because she's just such a godly woman. And she's listening. She's taught me so much about listening. So I would say to you, find out what you like doing. Because God, 1 Peter says, as each one has received a special gift, employed and serving others as a good steward of the manifold grace of God. In other words, he doesn't make junk. And so everybody has got a gift that they can use. Yeah. Maybe it's cooking meals for somebody. And I guarantee you, when you get to heaven, if there's a Hall of Fame, I doubt if I will be in it, but I really think my wife will be. And a lot of people that are not up front, just live godly lives. And the people that God says, this is what I command: love me and love others.
Yeah.
That's what he says. And so you do that with your neighbors or anything else like that. But God wants you to enjoy life. He doesn't want you to be miserable and I got to go and knock doors. No, you don't. You find out what you love to do, and you do what you love to do. And that's when I found out that I loved leading groups and men and speaking. I should have gotten taken a lot of lessons, but I'm such an idiot, and I didn't. But anyway, yeah, God loves every one of you, and He wants you to get to know Him. And one of the best places to do it, if you're not going to church at this time, is get in one of our groups.
Yeah. And
there's men's groups, women's groups, and now we got even mixed groups for you.
We even have online groups.
Oh, for sure.
What's great is you can join in from anywhere across, in particular my group, anywhere. Just Zoom in, right? I mean, that's what Zoom has taught us. And that was with COVID, it's the bonus, is we really learned to connect like we're connecting, So I have two more questions, and I just want to, reflecting on the people that you have a lasting impression on, have you considered what your faith legacy will be when you leave this world?
Well, I'm going to leave that up to other people. We started, we were doing that venture series last night, and we've got the leaders in Mississauga there. And we were asked, who are some of the influences? And two of the people in the group, their leaders of groups, mentioned my name and the influence that I've had on their lives. And so, but, and soon as they started talking about that, Lord, don't let me get a big head here. You put me in a position, and this was 15 years ago. I had a group of guys. I was having my devotions one morning, and it was in Ephesians, and it talks about patience, gentleness, and humility. My initials are PGH, Paul Garnet Henderson. And I knew God was talking to me that morning. Paul, you are not nearly as impatient as you should be. You're not nearly as gentle as you should be. Because when I tune guys up, I told you come late and I'll break both your wrists. You don't even memorize your scripture. But so patience, gentleness, and humility. I had to learn how to spell humility. But I still have one of the guys, he's now a judge. He was in that group, and every time we talk, he prays for me: patience, gentleness, humility. And Eleanor will tell you that I've made strides. I still got a long way to go, but that's just what happens. And God speaks to you at certain times in different areas, and so there you go. I forget the question, so I got to shut up.
Yeah, I love when you can see those moments where maybe I call them God winks, where God winks at you, and the patience, gentleness, humility, your initials, and you just kind of go, really? Is that what we're going to talk about? I do that all the time. I'm like, really? Is this what we're So I thank you for sharing that story, because I thought I was the only one, but no, God has humor. So
He made humans.
Yeah. So my last question for you, Paul, and I'm sad it's come to here, the end, but what brings you the greatest joy?
Probably my wife, my family, my grandchildren now. And we've been praying for probably 40 years. If we had one prayer answered, Lisa, and we prayed every day, that we would be an unbroken line of people, descendants that would love Jesus. That's our prayer. That's the legacy that we would like to live. Ellen and I would like to live behind, and we're so fortunate at this point that, we've got some young great-grandchildren but they've all got, they all have got good marriages and, Christian wives. And so that would be that gives me the greatest joy when I can look over my, our grandchildren. We talk to them all the time. We pray for them, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where we go. We always pray before meals, and they love praying. If I'm really hungry, I don't let them pray. I say the prayer. So that's the legacy that we would like to leave behind. And obviously, like we said, I got so many people. Eleanor has really struggled with COVID. She got it in April, and she's got long COVID. And I guarantee you, there's hundreds of people that pray for her on a day-to-day basis, and everybody knows how fortunate I am to marry her. That's, when you get to know us as a couple, I might be the face of it and all that kind of stuff, but she's the heart and soul, and everybody knows it. And so I am so proud of her.
So how is she doing? How is she doing now?
Oh, she's still struggling. She saw her doctor again, and she loses her voice, and she's still coughing. She's on that kind of nonsense, and so even we've got an ENT guy to go down. He wants to take a look at her throat, and he's going to do some more blood work and all that kind of stuff. And so her mother died of cancer. There's cancer and that kind of stuff. So I've always been a little petrified of that. But again, okay, Lord, and Lisa, neither one of them, we're not going to, I really believe, I'm not going to live one day longer or one day less than the Lord wants me to. When I look over my life, there's so many times that I could have died. Even like I was born on a sleigh, and it got to the hospital. The nurse, I met her on her 90th birthday. You were blue. She said, if it would have been another few minutes, you would never have made it.
Wow.
And my mother was born on a sleigh in the middle of a snowstorm. And when I got you, there was straw all over you, blood all over you. And I know you because I gave you your first bath, son. I met her on her 90th birthday. Amazing. Dixie Valley.
Oh. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. I do have one picture. I'm hoping my son plays hockey. And this picture that I'm going to show has been sitting in my inbox for probably 6 years. And I think it was number 19. And you were number 19, weren't you?
19.
I know.
Do you know why I wear 19? It's
No.
my wife's birthday, March 19th.
Oh.
And that's why I wore 19 all these years.
Oh, that's a great story. I want to thank you for taking this time with us, and just congratulations on that goal 50 years ago as of September 28th. It changed your life, and it moved you in a direction that has just been a beautiful story. So thank you for sharing it with us, and thank you for starting Leader Impact. I wouldn't be here doing this show without you. Whatever. Thank you.
Well, I get great satisfaction of. I got to just finish with this one. My grandson Alton, who was 21, he was out in Victoria, and his girlfriend there was some family out there, and they went to this party, and then somebody told him that I was his grandfather. He was your grandfather? I went to, they were in Victoria. He said, my wife wanted me to go to counseling and that kind of stuff, and he said, I wouldn't want to go. But then she said, well, Paul Henderson and his wife are going to be speaking at this marriage conference. And he said, I didn't want, but I wanted to meet you, and I went. And he said, you go home and tell your grandfather he saved my marriage. It changed my whole life, so you go home and tell him. And that was like 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
My grandson comes home and tells me that. So I love getting stories like that.
Yeah, that makes your grandson pretty proud. But to hear the story, you've been a huge influence around the world. So thank you again.
You're welcome, Lisa. You did a great job. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, well, this ends our podcast with Paul, and I want to thank him for joining us. If anybody wants to contact you, are you on social media at all?
No, I don't do social media, but you can get me through LeaderImpact.
All right.
I'm there, and I take everybody's phone call.
All right. Well, that's a good way to get people to leaderimpact.ca, and then just ask to speak to Paul. There we go. All right. Well, this ends our podcast, and I want to thank Paul again for joining us. If you're part of Leader Impact, you can always discuss or share this podcast with your group. And if you are not yet in Leader Impact Group, we would love to have you. Check out groups available in Canada at leaderimpact.ca, or if you're listening from anywhere else in the world, check out leaderimpact.com or get in touch with us by email, info@leaderimpact.ca, and we will connect you. And if you like this podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star rating or a review. This will help other global leaders find our podcast. Thank you for engaging with us, and remember, impact starts with you.